What's up, guys? Chief here from Chief Live Gaming today, talking about Khorne Daemonkin. Khorne Daemonkin again. And I've been seeing a lot of videos and requests, just kind of people in comments of Khorne videos talking about what's the best army for Khorne Daemonkin. What's the best army? How can I be really competitive? How can I do well with Khorne Daemonkin? And I think that's a pretty common question. So I'm going to do my best to address that just based on my personal experience so far with Khorne Daemonkin. The Codex hasn't been out all that long. So things are still relatively new. What else? Yeah, so let's kind of just talk about it. And I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of fielding formation detachments. Formations. Because that's kind of the cool new thing to do, right? You want to try to field formations because it's awesome. And the video I made earlier today actually talks about the three formations that I'm going to discuss in this video in a little more detail. If you want to check that video out, the three formations we are going to be using are Slaughter Cult, of course, Khorne's Bloodstorm, and the Gore Pack. Three core formations, and then depending on how many points we have, we're going to add in war engines, depending on the size of the game. So really, there's four, but the war engine is kind of just like extra. So those are the, if you are not sure what those three core formations are, don't know much about them, check out my other video. I go into them a little bit more in detail, just to go over the units and talk about that, talk about special rules, stuff like that. So we're gonna move forward here, assuming that you know all that information. If you don't, check the other video out. Quick disclaimer again: I'm not the best 40k player in the world. I don't win tournaments. I don't play a lot of tournaments. I don't play any tournaments. But I play for fun. I play with friends. And I like to field armies that are both fun to play as and fun to play against. That's kind of my theme, what I like to try to do. Something interesting for your opponent as well as for yourself to do. So, just don't take me too seriously. Don't take what I say as everything 40k. Because I might be wrong about a lot of stuff. Could happen. So, let's talk about the overall. I don't really want to break it down into exact army list, but let's just talk about a few finer points of this list. Now, within the Slaughter Cult, I may as well break out the Codex, crack it open here. You're talking about having an HQ, which is kind of important. I want to talk about the HQ that I would like to bring. You're going to have 2-day units of your troops, which in this case, we're going to field most of the time Berserkers. 1 to 4 units to possess, so your possessed tax. You have to bring that 1 unit of possessed. And then I'm going to forego the Chaos Spawn, the 0 to 2 units of spawn. And I love to have the 2 units of Cultists, just in blocks of 10 usually, or 8 if you want to be fluffy. And that will make up your core. Now for the HQ choice, here's what I like to do. You grab a Chaos Lord, you throw him on a bike, and you give him the Artifact of Slaughter, Korlath, the Axe of Ruin. Give him that. 60 points, and it's worth it. If you don't know what Korlath does, I'm going to read it to you right now. Caged Fury. If the bearer of this axe is reduced to 0 wounds or is otherwise removed as a casualty, a Bloodthirster of Unfettered Fury is summoned within 6 inches of that character. At the end of the controlling player's remaining turns, the Bloodthirster automatically loses D3 wounds. Invulnerable saves are allowed against these wounds as normal, other saves are not. So, really cool, right? That's awesome. You run in your Chaos Lord, when he dies, you get a Bloodthirster. He's going to lose wounds every turn, but that's okay. That's okay, unless you're super unlucky. He's got this 5-up invuln save. Figure on average you roll 2 wounds from the D3 every turn. That's reasonable to say, right? You'll save 1 of those, maybe, out of 2 turns. So he's going to lose 3 wounds over 2 turns on average. Roughly. From that debuff. You're assuming he gets the Lord will probably die like turn 2 or turn 3. So by the time the Bloodthirster is caught up for this negative effect of the wounds he takes, the game is pretty much over. But in the meantime, he is a nuisance. Pretty cool. So that's the just what I wanted to touch on in the Chaos Lord. I like to put him on a bike, put him by himself, don't put him in a unit, charge him up the field, turbo boost turn 1, and just be annoying, be right in their face. So they're presented with the choice of either killing the Lord and dealing with the Bloodthirster, or leaving the Lord alive, which is a big threat on his own, right? Easy enough. You could give him the Aura of Dark Glory if you want that 5-up invuln on him just to make him a little thicker, or you could just save the points because you want to kamikaze him in the first place. It's up to you. It's up to you. Kind of a fun, just a fun. Again, this is about fun, not necessarily the most competitive thing in the world. The other thing that you could do if you do want to save points is give your Herald. Take a Herald. I think they're 55 points base, so a lot cheaper than the Lord on a bike. Give him that axe and just foot slog him across the board. It'll take longer for the opponent to kill him. It'll be easier to ignore that Herald, but it's cheaper. It'll save points. So that's my personal experience with the Slaughter Cult. Again, you're just taking cultists. We talked about the other stuff in the Slaughter Cult. So for auxiliary choices, I find that with this setup of a Slaughter Cult, I'm usually between 700 and 800 points, all said and done. So right now we're at 700 or 800 points. So we talk about adding in the other formations that we talked about, which are the Khorne's Bloodstorm. Let's talk about that one first. We add in, excuse me, we add in 2 groups of Raptors, a group of Warp Talons, and if we want, again, this is all depending on the points, we can add in that Helldrake along with it. So, what is the role of this unit, of this formation? They would, personally, I like to put them right on the table turn 1. I don't even want to deep strike them. I will give the Raptors 2 Flamers, and the second group of Raptors, I'll either give 2 Flamers or 2 Meltas or 2 Flamers. Sometimes 4 Meltas total, sometimes 4 Flamers total, sometimes 2 of each. It all just kind of depends on what I'm feeling, what I think the army I'm going to be facing is going to have. Really just whatever the hell you feel like. They're both really good for different reasons. You know what those are. We're not going to talk more about it. Warp Talons, awesome at killing Space Marines. If you're fighting Space Marines, you're going to love the Warp Talons. If you're fighting anything else, you're probably still going to love them because they're badass in close combat. They're good. They're good. They fit well with the Khorne army. They fit well with this opening, a very fast, very aggressive style of army. So, let's talk about just the last formation really quick, and then we're going to go into the strategy a little bit. So, the last formation is the Gore Pack. The Gore Pack. And that's 2 units of Bikers, minimum, and a minimum of 1 unit of Fleshhounds. So, again, this is all depending on points. We're just going to talk about minimum for now. You bring your 2 units of Bikers. Again, same thing. Of those 2 units, each unit has 3 bikes. 3 bikes, minimum. And of those 3 bikes, you can take 2 special weapons, just like the group of 5 Raptors. So again, same thing. That unit can have 2 Meltas, 2 Flamers, 1 of each, whatever you're feeling like. So, you outfit those accordingly. Maybe give the champion a Power Fist. I forgot to mention that you could also give the Raptor champion a Power Fist, which is pretty nice. Depending on your points. It's all depending on your points. And then the Gore Pack is looking pretty sexual, right? Pretty awesome. So the Fleshhounds are there. They're going to infiltrate and scout move. And they're going to be pretty far forward on the board. So if you are moving second in turn 1, keep that in mind. You maybe want to get them in some cover. So that's the overall core of the army. And I mean, the Gore Pack is actually really cheap. The Bloodstorm is a little bit more expensive. I mean, just based off some napkin head math here, you're at like 1,400, 13 to 1,400 roughly, for this overall army, at like a reasonable outfitted selection. 13 to 1,400, something like that. Okay, so if you need to go higher and you still want to play this style of an army, what do you do? You add in some more engines. Or if you want, you can add in the Lord of Slaughter and get like a Bloodthirster. But for now, I want to talk about war engines. Things like Soul Grinders. I love Soul Grinders. Hellbrutes. Hellbrutes fit pretty okay in this army. They could use that long-range support. So that really helps fill in the gaps, those war engines. You get the twin-linked las Hellbrutes in the back, a couple of them. You get the pie plate from the Soul Grinder in the back, that Phlegm Bombardment. Really nice, really nice. Okay, so that's the basic outline. You could go all the way up to 2k points. You can go higher than that. You can do whatever you want. Whatever you want with those amount of points. As a disclaimer, if you hear me mentioning Flamer and Plasma, or Flamer and Melta, if you guys like Plasma, feel free to take Plasma. I just personally have really bad luck with Plasma on Gets Hot, so I don't like to field Plasma. But that's a very viable option in this army. Very, very viable option to outfit your Raptors and your Bikers with Plasmas. Now, I also want to talk really, really fast about Blood Tithe, because it's important. So remember, you're generating 1 Blood Tithe per turn for free. And because your army is so fast, you're going to generate a lot of Blood Tithe. You're going to get a nice surge around turn 2 and turn 3. What do we spend our Blood Tithe on? Well, with this army, I like to try to hit the benchmarks always to 5+ to get summoning. And I like to try to summon Blood Crushers for 6 and Flesh Hounds for 5 with this army, because they really mesh well. If you think about the army and how fast it is, and just the style you're trying to play, getting Blood Crushers on the table, getting more Flesh Hounds on the table, really, really, really adds to that. Now, you can do whatever you want. Again, trying to ascend your maybe your Berserker champions into Demon Princes or Bloodthirsters is also really great. Always a really great option. It all just kind of depends on what you want to do. And do remember that when you spend some Blood Tithe, because your Slaughter Cult formation, they also are granted the benefit from 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, or 1 point. Usually like to give that formation the Feel No Pain. Feel No Pain. Don't forget that. It can be really, really important. Really important. That's all I want to say about that. So, closing the Codex, we're going to talk a little bit about strategy, how this army is going to play, what you should go into the board thinking with this kind of an army. So, let's think about it. Let's think about deployment. Say we're playing Standard Dawn of War. Standard Dawn of War. Maybe you have the first turn, which is fine with this army. It's great. What you're going to try to do, personally, each flank, let's look at the board like this here. Let's pretend this is the board. Each flank has your 3 Bikers on the far ends. Then coming in towards the center, you have your group of Raptors. So it goes Bikers, Raptors, and then maybe your 2 Rhinos with Berserkers in them. Okay. And then if you bring in the Hellbrutes, maybe you put those more towards the center. And then like your Defiler and stuff is more towards the center, so your heavy support, to give it a better coverage. Okay? So behind that, depending on where your tactical objectives are, if that's what you're doing, you put your cultists, your 2 groups of cultists, okay? They can move up, sit on those objectives behind your front line. Makes sense? Following me? So you've got your possessed somewhere. In a Rhino, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe they're not in Rhino. Maybe your Warp Talons are deep striking. That's up to you. But this is what I generally like to try to think. You've got your Chaos Lord by himself on a bike somewhere. Doesn't really matter where he is, but he is going to run forward and he is going to turbo boost and he is going to be in the opponent's face, so they have to deal with him. By turn 2, something will have happened with that Chaos Lord, and that's pretty cool. So let's talk about turn 1, how you want it to go. Say if we again are pretending this is the battlefield, this length of my webcam here, midlines here, your Flesh Hounds are already at midfield from their Infiltrate Scouts combo. So you can move those forward, get right into your opponent's face. The Bikers can come forward, and if you want, they can turbo boost forward all the way to your opponent's deployment zone. Right in front of everything. Right in front. Okay? Your Rhinos You can move them a little and disembark. You can do whatever you want. You could even flat out all the way 18 inches, get them past midfield, or just go 12 and do some shooting, stuff like that. And then disembark them turn 2, get the berserkers out, ready in the midfield to respond to what your opponent has done in response to your aggression. So things that they might be doing are planning on deep striking things. So in that case, your Terminators or your Terminators, why can't I think of their name? Berserkers are midfield, ready to deal with either a threat from deep strike behind. They can turn around. They're ready to deal with things in front of them. They're ready to go wherever you need them to be. They're ready. They are your response unit. They're your response unit. Your cultists have taken, your half of the board. There will probably be a couple objective markers that you can sit them on. That's what they're meant to do. Good time for that. Get them set up. And your Hellbrutes, your Defiler, your Soul Grinder, whatever you have, they're just doing their thing in the back lines. So you're in their face turn 1. Your Raptors are again kind of the same thing. In the midfield, maybe in some cover, ready to respond to your opponent's move. So you've given them kind of a tough choice, right? You've given them something to worry about. There's bikes in their face. There's flesh hounds in their face. Behind that is some very mobile infantry and the threat of Warp Talons deep striking in. The threat of maybe a Helldrake coming in. They need to try to respond, but overall they're contained, right? You've created this nice, let's see if I can do this here. With your forces, kind of like a funnel. Because you push so hard on the flanks, you're funneling them towards the middle a little bit. They're either going to have to pop through the sides and try to sweep around you, in which case your Berserkers are in the center, they can respond. Or they're just going to get, just like you planned, kind of contained, and you're going to be able to take board advantage, take the field where you want to take those objectives, and they're going to have to do a lot of work to bust you out of these buildings, to bust you out of the cover, to get through to where they need to be to score points in this game, to score objectives. So that's the general strategy that I like to do. I think it's really fun. It either works really well, or not so well. You could get demolished. With those bikers are just dead sometimes. You're like, oh, maybe I should have thought about that a little more. So, that's the kind of the main decision turn 1 is whether you're going to turbo boost your bikes up, leave them back, and kind of do that turn 2. Either way, you have a lot of stuff midfield. Really good target saturation for them to deal with many different considerable threats, right? So if you're like me, I kind of like to take Meltas on everybody. We're talked about the Raptors and the bikes. So if you have 2 groups of Raptors, 2 groups of bikes, that's 8 Meltas on the field. If you turbo boost, don't run anything, turn 1, they're at midfield and have a 12-inch movement next turn and then can shoot their Meltas. Think about that. They have coverage pretty much wherever they want to be to take out the opponent's high priority targets on turn 2. Maybe even turn 1 if you go second on turn 1. That's a big threat. But what do? What do they decide to kill first? What do they want to take out? Do they shoot out your Chaos Lord for that Slay the Warlord point, but then deal with the Bloodthirster later? Do they take out your bikes on the flanks, leaving the Raptors open to do what they need to do? Do they try to take out the Raptors, leaving the bikes open to do what they need to do? Do they try to take everything out? Odds are maybe, they'll thin things a little, but there's still going to be threats out of those units still alive for the next turn. Now, the beauty of this, and I've had it happen actually twice, which I'm not trying to bank on this as a strategy, but if it happens, it's pretty hard for your opponent to recover, is if your opponent relies heavily on reserves. So think about this. Say they maybe have 1/3 of their army in reserves, or 1/4 of their army in reserves. And like we talked about, you're putting almost everything you have on the table turn 1. And you're really fast turn 1. If they fail their reserve rolls turn 2, even one reserve roll for a unit of deep striking, Terminators or something. You know, a relatively key unit out of their points in reserve. Think about how hard it's going to be for them to deal with what you've presented to them. If they cannot get out what they need to, because that's their plan, is to deep strike, is to get these things out of reserve, their flyers, on the board turn 2. If that doesn't happen, you have a huge advantage. And you can do a lot of damage turn 2 and turn 3. If they fail again, there's not much they can do. You might even table them straight away. There's just too much heavy firepower. There's too much mobility. You're going to score too many victory points. It's just not easy to come back from that. Think about it, guys. Let me know what you think about this style of army. I think I kind of covered everything I wanted to. Some brief points, some exciting concepts. Let me know if it works for you. Let me know if it doesn't work for you. If you have any modifications or things you'd like to add to this kind of a style of list, let me know. Anything you want to talk about related to 40k, let me know. Try this out, guys. Try this out. Let me know. I want to hear about it. It's what makes this fun for me. Makes it even more fun to hear your stories. So, thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you do like the content I provide, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on my other social media outlets if you'd like to do that. Stick around for more content related to 40k and other gaming subjects. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Have a great day. Bye now.